Hey, what's going on, guys? Phil and Cruz here. The second part of the critical theory discussion that we had last week. Cruz, you have any opening statements for the audience out there in regards to our previous talk? Maybe give a rundown of what we previously talked about.
Yeah, of course. So last week we started getting into critical theory, where it started, where it's gone, and how it relates to basically everything that you see, everything that you see nowadays. And my big one was the whole, concept and mantra of systemic racism. And also another big one is like the whole concept of like defunding the police, how the entire police system is an inherently racist system. It's an unjust system, so therefore it needs to be torn down top to bottom. So anytime that you hear a system is unjust and they point out particular injustices without actually saying anything about what people's decisions may have been or anything about the rules, just that the outcome was disproportionate for one group over another. And the system needs to basically be torn down, whether it's, if you want to use defunded as the nice way of basically saying torn down. That's all coming from the original basis of critical theory from the Frankfurt Institute in Germany, which they've spun out, critical theory, critical race theory. The whole feminist movement is all that. So a lot of the things that you're seeing out nowadays, which I mean, it really got me interested. It's if you actually start getting into the critical theory discussion about it, it is very, very complicated about how they describe how to prove one, the ideas about around it. But I got into it because it was really important, because it's so prevalent nowadays throughout everything that you're seeing on the media and a lot of the stuff that's being pushed by the Democratic Party right now.
Yeah, I think one of the things too is it is kind of it's a really loaded topic, and it does really tell of where the times that we're in. And one of the great things, at least for me, was that I was able to digest a little bit more of the content because a lot of busy stuff going on. But on top of that, it is really important to consider like what is going on right now in society, especially since the Democratic Party is really using some of these concepts that this theory provides as a platform or as a way to gain momentum in society. And I think there's a lot of, me particularly in my personal opinion, there's a lot of dangers across it, because I think um, I don't know. As I've taken another week to think about it a little bit further, it was kind of like it's kind of a dangerous concept uh, to take on. You know what I mean?
Oh,
To
it's
hold.
very dangerous. It has its uses. It's not complete. If you were just to take it away, it's not complete garbage. The idea of it, of analyzing something for an injustice from a social aspect, is not inherently a bad thing, but it's very specific. It doesn't really work in a lot of different situations, and it's just being applied across the board. The whole idea of necessarily of white privilege and white guilt and all of some of the diversity training courses that you hear about, that you hear some of the more extreme diversity training courses that you don't really agree with some of the concepts that they're talking about. That all stems from critical theory. So, I mean, the amount of pervasiveness of this concept throughout society right now just floored me.
Well, so one of the things I actually want to point out is that the language itself, right? The people that control the language control essentially control the person, right? So um, you have George Orwell, who came up with people that that control the language, and I might be butchering this a little bit. The people that control the language, control the people. So
Mm-hmm.
when we take words like white guilt or white privilege, it becomes that transformative aspect that people wanted to describe, whether it was true or not. And that's kind of like this
Sure.
weird. It's a weird dynamic that's happening.
Black
Um,
Lives Matter. That,
exactly.
that
Yeah.
Black Lives Matter. That slogan, that actual institution is not really actually about Black Lives Matter. We all know that. That's not a big secret.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, they posted on their website of what their
How they've
actual
cleaned it
goal
up?
is.
They've actually cleaned that up.
They
They pulled some of
did.
the stuff off. Yeah,
Wow.
they started taking some of the
Wow.
stuff down. They started trying to hide some stuff. Who was it the other day? Not to get sidetracked. I think it was Officer Tatum. Officer Tatum, YouTube there. If anybody hasn't seen him, go check him out. That's my source on this one. Definitely don't want to steal anything from anybody. But Officer Tatum, he did a little demo the other day where basically like you're into Black Lives Matter, went to go and donate, and it actually it goes over the Donate Blue, like the full Democratic donation.
Yep.
That's actually where it redirects you to. Um, that one gave me a chuckle the other day because I had actually never clicked on the donate of the site itself, but yeah, you click on it, redirects over to the Donate Blue because of course they're not actually like a 501c3p charity, so they can't take donations themselves.
It's kind of ironic. That part I, I did not pick up on, but it is kind of interesting, right? That uh, they're not a charity, they're not an organization, they're not a for profit, but they have another institution handling their transactions. So again, it's kind of it's almost like they function more of a political group more than an actual charity, or are they serving that community?
I mean, so you hear a lot about them, but have you heard about anything that besides maybe bailing some people out, like what have they done?
I mean, I don't know, other than the
Can anybody actually answer it? I mean, I could do more research on it, but I actually don't know anything that they've like necessarily done. And it's estimated that they've received in donations over the $1 billion mark. I believe some of the estimates are now.
mm,
That's there's millions and then there's billions.
I
Like
mean,
that's starting to be
that's like public company stuff right there. That's that might as well put a stock ticker on
that. Yeah.
to raise
So
that kind of funds. I mean,
that's unbelievable.
but the question is, like, where are those funds going? What is it serving? And if an organization has 1,000 people, I mean, unless they're pocketing all the money, I can't imagine that there's. I mean, there's got to be some actions that they're taking to improve, the schooling system in certain areas, or maybe being able to provide, school supplies for students. You know, I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure what the funding goals are, and then where the funds go to, um, you know, to service the community.
No
Or
idea. I don't think they expected to get this much in their wildest dreams, but it caught wildfire. Like, that's a ton of money.
yeah, I mean, $1 billion.
So there's no accountability. It's their money now. They legitimately they were given the money with no restrictions. The people that have access to the funds, the founders, they can do whatever they want. They can just go and buy houses or cars or anything. There's no restrictions on it. You didn't donate under a specific guise that this was specifically going anywhere. You just donated. So congratulations. Good for you. Morons.
So, getting back to the critical theory aspect, and I think the first thing that since we're on the topic of racism, one of the interesting things that I actually found out today was on a video on YouTube, and what was it was from Free the People, I want to say, channel, and one of the things that they brought up was that Webster Dictionary is actually changing the definition of racism to match the definition that's prescribed by critical theory,
Yeah.
and which is a very kind of odd concept. I mean,
Webster started changing the definition of gender as well.
And there's, I mean, this just totally sounds like 1984 and Animal Farm.
Well, the thing about when you start
But
changing that now is that actually has legal ramifications, because then when you
sure.
if the accepted definition of the word changes, then legal writing and legal determinations are then inherently changed,
Oh yeah,
because
yeah.
these documents were written based on the meaning of the words.
Oh sure.
So you either have to update those documents, or you've literally changed laws by changing the meanings and definitions of words.
Well, I'll tell you what. One of the good things, I guess, that
Like,
happens
maybe you
that
can
happens
get
after
away
this.
with maybe you can get away with the concept of originality. I'm not, if anybody's not familiar with that, that's the whole, it's the whole legalese that you analyze a law or a legal document based on the historical context and time period that it was written on. It's very important. It relates to like Supreme Court justices. It's always very important that a Supreme Court justice always expresses that they're going to analyze the document based on the historical period when it was written, which is also the big argument with the pro-choice, pro-life fight between the Supreme Court, meaning that the Constitution, when it was inherently written, they had no concept of the pro-choice, pro-life. It wasn't meant to be written to oversee that, but I won't digress. But with the changing of the words, like you were saying, with changing of racism, if the person interpreting the law doesn't then say, well, this was written previously to the change in the meaning of the word, so we have to take it here. If that's not done, then yeah, you're changing the law.
Well, I think, I guess we could say that one of the benefits of something like this, right, is that attorneys are going to have work um, as something like this progresses forward, right? It's kind of a strange, a strange kind of result of all this stuff taking effect, because if anyone's ever looked at a legal document, they always have like a definitions page to describe, like, if who, what's a person, what's a customer, or whatever it is, and then they um so so that in a lot of ways people try not to misinterpret some of the information that's provided in there. um
Yeah. So citing those references is key, of course.
so but again, it's the it's kind of strange, right? Because we tend to think like, oh yeah, there's when there's these protests happening, you would think that there's this, like, oh, this very small kind of blip of actions that are happening on the streets. But when we start diving into like a modern society, a modern culture, there's so many layers to what gets impacted. Describing things like, oh, the definition changing, and then going into oh, now the law is going to have to change. It's not just this, oh, okay, it's racism. It becomes a whole larger system that gets affected by these small actions. And I think my personal opinion on this is that I think some people are not gathering some of the scope that's involved with, you know, a system that's been around for, several hundred years, um, has evolved over a course of period of time.
So what
And
did they change for the meaning of it? Because like I actually don't know for the racism one,
I,
because in my mind, I would have assumed at this point in time, Webster had the meaning of racism down, and there's nothing that's come to light that would change it. But I mean, that's also, that's asking a lot nowadays, the way things are.
well,
I also, side note, I have my new hero. I have a new hero in life. I'm gonna tell you who it is in a minute.
who's your hero?
He's a great man.
All right, so I have a Vox article here about the word racism and the
Yeah,
and
fire it up.
so I'm just going to read it out loud. So this is from Vox, that was published on June 10th, 2020, and Merriam-Webster has a new definition of racism.
Okay.
Signifying the larger cultural shift felt around the U.S., Merriam-Webster will now include systematic oppression in its latest definition of racism. The dictionary, which has long served as a gatekeeper of the English lexicon, made plans for the update after recent Drake University graduate Kennedy Mitchum emailed editors frustrated about the current definition's inadequacy. Merriam-Webster's current definition of racism reads: a belief that racism is the primary determinant of human traits and capacities, and that racial differences produce an inherent superiority over a particular race. Doctrine or political program based on the assumption of racism and designed to execute its principles. A political or social system founded on racism, racial prejudice, or discrimination. Mitchum, a black woman who hails from Florissant, Missouri, a city just north of Ferguson, wanted the dictionary to provide a more detailed definition, one that included an explanation of systemic oppression. She grew tired of having conversations about racial injustice just to have people point to the dictionary as a defense for why they're not racist. I kept having to tell them that definition is not representative of what is actually happening in the world. The way that racism occurs in real life is not just prejudice, it's a systemic racism that is happening for a lot of Black Americans. Mitchum was both shocked and pleased when editors at Merriam-Webster replied to her concern and pledged to make a change. In the response to Mitchum, Merriam-Webster editor Alex Chambers said, "While our focus will always be on faithfully reflecting the real-world usage of a word, not on promoting any particular viewpoint, we have concluded that omitting any mention of the systemic aspects of racism promotes a certain viewpoint itself." So I want to skip over to what did it change to? It doesn't say.
So what? Yeah, no, go ahead. So she wants systemic racism applied into racism because people were saying that the system wasn't racist when she was saying it was.
Yeah, I guess having
Sure, I'm
having
fine with that. Whatever. That's actually not that crazy of a thing. If there is inherently a system that is systemic, that there actually is a systemically racist system, sure. My argument with her that she pitched it in is she's probably saying that currently our system is racist and we have systemic racism, in which case I would say you're an idiot.
well, the thing is,
So
well,
we
okay,
would just
so
have a disagreement on that. Like if she wants to try and still prove it, like sure, whatever, go for it. Sounds good.
well the
Show me the law.
well just like a lot of words, right? There's a lot of different definitions. So I think for something like that, um, like any really good decisions, right? There's usually like a committee that reviews it. Maybe it's an additional definition of what already exists. Um, you know, because like it says, like, oh, you could have a number of different definitions, some that don't even apply. For instance, like, oh, the word cool and hot, like they could mean the
Yeah.
same thing, right? But someone
And
who
like for sure that was absolutely a knee jerk. That wasn't like a proactive. That was absolutely a reactionary BS decision on their call.
well again
Like
and,
they
but
were
that
totally SJW in it. Like that's not even a question.
yeah, so and that in itself becomes another problem, right, with this whole thing because okay, so someone makes one complaint. There's 330 million people in the US. One complaint is going to completely change, some official documentation that
They just
describes stuff.
whoever got that in was like, this is an easy way to get some brownie points. We can pitch this, it does make sense. Let's just go with it because it looks good. Like that's exactly what happened.
Well, I guess, I mean, not a lot of people are really buying hardcover books and
Yeah, I
or
mean
in
Webster.
dictionaries.
Yeah, they're a little obsolete at this point. I mean, I still, still shows up and you can Google them and stuff, but I mean, it's Webster's dictionary.
Yeah,
So, all right. So, all right. I don't know if you heard this, but I have a new favorite person. So one, like I'm never watching the NBA again. Let's start right there. Like I hate the NBA now. I'm absolutely done with the NBA. But there's
uh,
one man that this guy is the bravest man I've seen in a while. And his name is Charles Barkley. I don't know if you've seen his comments,
I'm not.
but that guy has got a set on him. Holy cow. So I'm sure like the overall, you haven't seen it? Has
No, I
anybody else
haven't.
there? Am I talking to nobody? Has anybody in the audience, anybody listening right now, have you seen the Charles Barkley comments? Because you have Charles Barkley on an NBA post game, live, basically live, slightly tape delay, of course, it's television, but
Mhm.
basically live, commentating about, on an NBA platform. We have the NBA. We've seen we know the NBA stance on everything, right?
Yeah.
Facts don't matter. We say slogans. Only 20% of us are registered to vote. Hoorah. That's their mantra. He goes, I'm going to sum it up. Basically, he says, we really need to stop with this whole defunding the police thing, because all the rich neighborhoods are still going to have police. All the white people, they're not going to vote to not have police. We're going to all vote not to defund the police, and we're just not going to have policing down in the inner city. It's foolish. Like, we can have police reform and stuff, but defunding it, like, all these other people are still going to have police. They're not going to defund their police. It's only going to affect us.
Mm.
That, as a commentator from the NBA, just that alone is unreal. And then he followed it up. He followed it up huge with the comment about Breonna Taylor, saying, yep, I know it's a tragedy, but we can't put her in the same thing with George Floyd, because, I mean, her boyfriend was there and he did shoot a police officer first.
Mm.
To say that as an NBA commentator post game in this era right now, that guy, he's a hero. That's unbelievable.
Yeah. Anyone out there in the audience, please share your thoughts on some of this stuff, because this all applies to the whole critical theory topic that we're dissecting, and we're looking at other examples out there, and then obviously we're running into different industries and different activities out there that um, are getting on this whole critical theory bandwagon, and we want to get your thoughts on this whole situation, because it's really gone overboard. I mean, let's really be serious here. I mean,
Oh,
it's out of control. I mean, I'm out here in Ecuador, and people are asking me questions about, like, is it safe in the U.S.? I'm like, you know what? In certain areas, yeah, but this I was telling them, like, a lot of my friends here, and obviously Sophia's like, you know the whole racism thing, you know, has really just been kind of uh, magnified over the course of the last, I want to say since Obama. I want to say since Obama, it
I mean,
really.
critical theory is a direct derivative of socialism and Marxism. Like,
Oh
the
yeah,
critical theory idea, like, all of these things, were pervading a lot of initiatives to make our world and our system here better. And we're pervading them with ideology that is a direct descendant of socialistic and Marxism views. And they don't work together. They don't work together. Like, you can't sit here and say that this system is completely fundamentally flawed and needs to be burnt down, and then still be a part of the US. You disagree with what we're founded on.
yeah, and that's the whole kind of shtick of the whole thing, is that, like, part of the reason why there part of the reason why someone even has the ability to come up with the
Just
idea
even
of
the
oppression.
ability to even disagree
Yeah, the ability.
is
Yeah,
because that something in the foundation we did was right.
yeah.
So you can't disagree with everything.
Well, it's weird because the act of protesting, and the act, like when I said previously last week, was that the act of protesting identify. If someone's protesting that they're oppressed, they've just accepted and declared that they're oppressed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's
And if the system, like our system, allows them to protest this, right?
yeah, and that's
Our system can't be flawed from top to bottom. When we're giving you a specific channel that allows you by right to protest and make things better, I can see I can see wanting some change and everything, but the top down systemic racism, burn it all down, defund the. I can't deal with any of it anymore. I'm done with all of it. And I'm really glad lately around, particularly around my area here, which is pretty liberal, seeing more and more defend the police, support this, support that, just seeing a lot more creep up, creep up, creep up. People are getting tired with it. They're getting more outspoken. Penny pincher, they're putting out bigger signs for everybody so that everybody can see those big signs.
Oh, you want to hear something crazy? I think the sign that she gave somebody actually appeared on the news.
Because it's probably a billboard.
No, he had like electrical cable, like electrical wires, uh, protecting the sign so that people wouldn't destroy it. And it's right out in the public, and and it's like it really is right now. People who oppose the idea, the majority idea, which I don't even think is the majority idea, um, is that you know people are people want to have a good life. People want to have a calm life, right? And
Of
it's
course.
and at the same time, it's very strange. And I think the same way that we're expressing our views and things like that, a lot of people are getting fed up with being bullied, because that's what it is. It's like if no one's subscribing, if people aren't subscribing to these ideas of critical theory, and oh, you gotta support the defund the police and stuff like that, like there's gonna be a lot of backlash, because you know you need some type of enforcement. You need some type of authority to be able to handle, you know, people that are going to act unjust towards other people. The police are there to prevent situations from escalating. When things escalate, beyond that, then there's going to be like the National Guard and so on and so forth. I mean, that's just the
Mm-hmm.
natural course of things. But in civil society like the U.S., yeah, everyone's on edge, sure, because of what's going on in the world today. But this whole defund the police thing, I think is embedded with there's other intentions in there that are for lack of a better term, a little bit more sinister.
I mean,
Sinister.
yeah, sure. If you want to go conspiracy theory, I mean, you
That's what I
look at
want to
where
go.
it came. If you look at where you look at the foundation of it, you look at where it came from. You look at where critical theory came from. You look at this being a critical theory mantra, and it's obviously to sow anarchy. By who? Who knows? But is that the idea of it is indeed to sow anarchy?
But here's the irony. Here's the whole irony that I'm really it's just driving me bonkers, right? So you have these protests, and they're wanting to push anarchy, right? Which is one of the topics that we missed doing last week. But they want to push anarchy, but really what they're trying to do is push the other side of the establishment, which is the Democrats, which is kind of ironic, because if the idea is to remove the existing establishment, why are these protests trying to push the other side, the other establishment? Doesn't make any sense
So
to me.
they are and some aren't. So like I think it's more that the Democratic Party actually latches onto them and is like recognizing them that they are more likely to be their base and vote for them than they would be to vote for the Republican Party. So they're latching onto them more so than that necessarily those underlying people are really Democrats.
True, true. Does anyone have any comments or questions that you guys want to add to some of the stuff that we're talking about? Again, so
So
today's episode is about a continuation of the topic of critical theory. We've gone over some examples like Charles Barkley speaking live as one example of some of the things that are just kind of a little bit ridiculous today in society. But on top of that, just kind of trying to understand, where people are going. At least in my head right now, is trying to understand what I'm trying to understand what the end game is with w- w- with what's going on. And then obviously
well my
there's a huge bifurcation with like I said, for you and I, we lean more towards conservative, even though we view ourselves as independent. the bifurcation of the social behaviors has become completely politicized. So
Yeah.
we want to get the audience out there to chime in. Let us know what you guys think. Uh, what experience have you guys been encountering? Uh, Back to you, Cruz.
So yeah, the way the segue into the anarchy thing is that my what I believe is that there's no way, there's no better way to cover up like an economic injustice than with a social injustice.
Oh, sure,
So
sure.
this movement right now with the anarchy, everything that's being pushed is really just to cover up an economic injustice. You have everything going like how explain to me how Jeff Bezos split his money with his wife during his divorce, gave her half, made her the richest woman in the world. And then he proceeded to somehow, in the middle of COVID, when good old Massachusetts has shut down over 5,000 bars and restaurants and something like 10 to 15,000 small businesses are done. This guy increased his wealth by $58 billion. He also happens to own the Washington Post, which tends to write a very particular set of articles.
Penny Pincher has a comment here. I'm going to go to that real quick. So, indoctrination is alive and well. Part of the discussion her daughter had in school today is sharing her thoughts on the gender pay gap. That's actually a
Oh
really
boy.
good. That's a really good
Oh boy.
segue. That's a really
Oh
good
boy.
segue.
Penny Pincher, why are you trying to get me worked up here? So,
All right, that's a really good segue because part of the critical theory aspect encompasses things like racism, encompasses things like feminism. So I think that's actually a good segue to get into the other aspect of this critical theory topic that we're talking about, which is well, feminism and gender pay gap. Uh, I want to start with you, Cruz, first. What do you think there's a pay gap?
I think
Not
there was.
not taking into consideration that you just talked about Jeff Bezos' wife, who just walked away
What
like,
you were
like
45 billion or something.
$45
It was some.
billion dollars.
It's an absurd number. It was half. It was almost. It was nearly half of his net wealth at the time,
You know,
which I believe he was.
she could give away 44 of that, and she'd still be a billionaire.
It was a ton of money.
um,
Ton.
so
Now,
so no, you don't think that there is a gender pay gap?
was there?
No, or
Yeah,
is there? Is there?
absolutely. Is there any more? Nah, no. I'd have to see. I'd have to be given a very specific scenarios, considering that some of the top companies, when they actually did a review recently, like Google in particular, found that they were actually overcompensating and paying females higher. So there's actually situations now where we're seeing it's actually shifted towards an overcompensation
Well,
towards females.
well, that's an interesting point because I know that I read an article a while back ago about Netflix giving unlimited vacation, but also unlimited maternal leave
Yeah,
for women with full pay. So you know, and usually that's a large stopgap, right? So my father actually brought up a really good point. He goes, you know, why is there a pay gap in the first place? And then we're gonna get to the comment section here. But why is there a pay gap in the first section? Well, part of the reason why I brought up the whole Netflix thing, the Netflix maternity leave, is that well, if you leave work for maternity leave, then then someone's not working, right? So if they leave for 6 months, that's 6 months of no work. So wouldn't that mean that someone would get paid less because they're not working for 6 months? You know, so in that regard, the pay gap becomes becomes a wash because if someone's not working because they're out on maternity or paternal leave, um, you know, causes them to not receive pay. So in concept, or actually, if physically, what ends up happening is the person is just not working. So obviously, there's a lot of other variables that take into account with someone wanting to take maternity leave, but
Yeah.
that's one example of like, oh, where some of that pay gap stuff started to take form, and then
Well, and I don't. And my issue with this too, like, I don't want to study from 40 years ago. While I agree, 40 years ago, 20, 30 years ago is not that long ago. I understand. That's also I can't be held accountable for a statistic from 20 or 30 years ago when I'm living today,
sure,
when we're
exactly,
evaluating right now. You
exactly.
can't keep calling me, you know, macho or masochist or racist or anything based on 20 or 30 years ago. It needs to be evaluated right now.
And so Penny Pincher has another comment here. So she says that her daughter's response is that it shouldn't be about gender and more about experience and skills. But she also said that men take on dirtier jobs like sewer and garbage picking, and they don't complain about the pay gap, which is which is sort of true, right? Like there's this kind of I don't know if it's a cultural thing, or if it's like if it's or if it's just societally, that's how it works. But one of the, more likely than not, men are going to take more physical labor type jobs over women. That's just what it is. It's not saying that women wouldn't do the job. It's more of like, it's like engineering. Like, oh, more than likely, more men will take up engineering. Like, I'm
You,
all for women doing these types of jobs and things like that.
every study that you do has to be done in its own silo. So, like, if you're a teacher, like, you can only evaluate males and females just in teachers. You can't spread it across the board because guess what? Big secret: men and women are different. I know it's crazy. Men and women are different, and they have a tendency to gravitate towards one field over the other. If you went into a nursing class, who would you think you would see more, men or more women? It's not a big secret. It's not, it's not chauvinist. There's nothing wrong with it. It's okay. There'd be more women in there.
Yeah,
If you went into a mechanical engineering class, you would probably see more males. It just is.
yeah.
No big deal.
And
Each
there,
individual field needs to be managed and looked at in that other thing. And then there is a factor that needs to be accounted for, which there is a chance that women will take time off for a long time to have children and spend time with their children. And that's an amazing thing. But unfortunately, the workplace can't give you monetary compensation and experience credit points for taking that time off and having children.
yeah, and
You shouldn't be penalized for it in any way, shape, or form, but you do lose a time of experience. So if you came out, you worked for 5 or 6 years, took 5 years off, and now you and a man are both going for a job at, say, the age of 35, and he has 15 years of experience and you only have 9, there's a difference. And it's not good or bad, it just is. But you had an amazing time. You spent a ton of time with your kids. You did a great job having that experience and raising them. Everything isn't always just about money either.
yeah. It's I think what I think a lot of people are trying to do is trying to have balance in their life, right? But the whole gender thing has just like the whole racism discussion has really hit a fever pitch, and I think a lot of it is just a little bit overblown with like, oh,
My
the what is it, the pink tax, gender pay gap and all those types of things. I don't think those are um, I don't think they're as valid as they were, like you were describing. Like 40 years ago, it was a lot different. Today, it's very different.
even 30. I mean, even 30, late or coming out of the 80s into the 90s. There's absolutely was still some issues. Absolutely. But that's not today. That's not right now.
Yeah, and so Penny Pincher also has a question here, but I do want to make a point before we get to that. So I want to talk about just real quick, and this has to do with gender. I was watching a YouTube video a few months ago, and one of the things that was described, a guy was being interviewed who was a Navy SEALs Special Forces guy, and he was talking about why women shouldn't, or what was it like, why there's a limited number of women that join the special forces, and part of the reason is because their menstrual cycle becomes a health hazard under the conditions that these special forces are in. So not only is there, just kind of a cultural societal aspect of behavior, or that influences behavior or what choices people make for their occupation, but there is the biological um, variable that can contribute to why certain fields are taken on by certain groups, whether it's like, oh, um, like taller people are going to play basketball, you know, um, smaller people are going to be gymnasts. You know what I mean? Like those, like it fits the category, but it also helps. Like someone who's smaller, more lightweight, is going to have a higher strength to weight ratio, is going to have the ability to throw their body around much better. Someone who's
Oh,
taller is
tons,
going to be easier, going to have an easier time to dunk.
all of them.
So in the same sense that even these types of things, these physicalities also translate to certain types of occupations. That doesn't apply to things like mechanical engineering or someone wants to take like art or stuff like that. It's really about like, okay, um,
My big thing is that you can only evaluate these things in like very small couple year periods because we are always trying to get better.
yeah,
Like we don't know who wants a gender pay gap. That's absurd. Like nobody who would ever be okay with that nowadays.
yeah.
If,
And you know what the crazy thing is? I have a lot of friends, and I obviously have a lot of sisters too. They um some of the women in the household are the breadwinners, you know?
like
And
what do you have? Three? I think I have four sisters. You have three. Like I don't want a pay gap for my sisters. Like
yeah,
what a big
exactly.
surprise.
Yeah,
Like
it's like, yeah, you want them to do
but
well. You want them, and then, like you want to encourage someone to do well. That's really kind of the
yeah, and they're
aim
all
for
doing
some.
amazing.
Yeah.
You know, a bunch of them are doing better than I am. So it's not.
So let's get to Penny Pincher's question here. Do you think this is a great question, by the way? Do you think this kind of conversations should be left out of the classroom? Um, I have a particular answer for this, but Cruz, why don't you tackle it first? We'll let you go out in the open.
So the gender pay gap. Yeah, yeah. I think they're walking a really fine. I think they're walking a really tough line. I think that it really, at the earliest this can be done, is at the end of high school, college level. I don't think that these particular conversations um, should be part of a child's learning. I think we can use other topics. I think we can use other areas to help children to learn. And this is coming from somebody that has no children at all, so I'm completely talking out of my butt right now. But there's there's other topics out there that can be used to teach a child critical thinking and not critical theory, just general critical thinking methodologies to help them engage in conversation and arguments and debates that may really kind of infringe on what this child's parental beliefs may be. That's my big issue with it, is that some of these things start going from, factual to infringing on the parent should be the one that is instilling certain values on it. The gender pay gap one is kind of iffy. It's a little bit on there. I think it's probably an okay topic if done correctly and put in the right context. But there's certain ones that are not. And the big one for me right now that I know has been starting in different school system is the teaching of gender, which the definition has been changed. That one, if I did have a child and they were being taught certain things in school about gender that I disagree with, I would have a huge problem with
All right. Great answer. So I'm going to answer that as well. So I say yes, they should, but it should be part of a subject, and the teacher should be neutral in regards to allowing the child to come up with their own answer and their own thoughts. Obviously, there's a certain age where kids might not be able to formulate their ideas, but I think it's important that even though that they're learning these other subjects, that it should be part of something like sociology or psychology, or even literature, because a lot of these types of topics do come up in the literature context. And despite what people think, even at an early age, there's a lot of these types of things that are embedded in literature and in sociology. And I also think it is important for kids to have this in school, because it's not like, when you think of sociology in history, right? You're living it. Everybody's living it. So it's not something that people are going to be able to avoid. But the most important thing is how a kid navigates through it, at least in my eyes, as an uncle looking from the outside in. Not having kids of my own, is that, like, to me, kids are very self-aware, but there's certain things that fully they might not be fully developed in. So getting exposure to it, if they get exposure, then no matter what, they're going to get exposure to this type of information, regardless if it comes from school, regardless if it comes from parents. And they're going to get it from watching TikTok, watching YouTube, or from their friends, or from wherever it is, because information is just out there. So rather than avoid it and put it into a later time frame, it makes sense that kids should get involved with it. But the important thing that I really think is happening, and something that you touched on, that kids are being taught this whole gender, the concept of gender in school, is that the way it's being indoctrinated is a different thing. So the kids should be taught the subject and be able to think about the topic and describe it and write about it and have their opinions, but they shouldn't be blasted for stating something that doesn't agree with the teacher. The teacher is only there to facilitate the kid's ability to think critically and deeply about certain subjects.
So
And then
there's some that are so tough though. So say they kicked in the gender. Say they started off the conversation about the gender pay gap. I'm the teacher, and I say, so what do you think about the gender pay gap? Right?
well,
That's inherently already biased because I have said that there is a gender pay gap. What child do you know that
okay.
doesn't have it, that is not of a certain age and intelligence level, that is going to say, well, I don't believe there is a gender pay gap, when you're, as the teacher,
Good.
the authority figure, just said, what do you think about the gender pay gap?
Well, okay, that's good. That's a good point. Maybe it should be worded differently. It should be something like, with men and women in the workforce, are they paid differently? That's a more neutral point of putting it. So in that way, the way that you just pointed out, that's almost like an indoctrinating way of teaching kids, right? Like
Which is the real slippery slope nowadays, especially with a lot of the, I mean, it's been a slippery slope forever, but I feel like the slope is getting steeper and steeper with some of the things that are going on nowadays.
Oh, I've spoke with other teachers and people that work at schools, and I've talked to my nieces and nephews, and they're like, it's strange. Even to them, they're talking about it, that the whole thing is strange. Like,
So here, oh no, these are female doctors,
so
percentage difference, male doctors, female doctors. Well, these are, at least they kept it in doctors. So just for fun, just because I just did, gender pay gap statistics, Google, slam, hit, right? Images, give me some of these charts. because I honestly, I got caught a little off guard. I haven't recently reviewed this, and so I was just looking at what are some of the initial charts and stuff that come up. You ready?
I'm
No
ready.
reference at all. You ready? Women's, all this says right here, this chart right here that comes up. It's like the second image on Google, okay? Women's annual earnings compared to white men's. No context, no reference, no discussion of job, nothing at all. Just a chart. 100% is white men, 55.6K. Asian women, 53.9. White women, 44.6. Black women, 36.7. Hispanic women, 32.1. No context, no nothing, no reference, no delineation between different jobs, anything. Just, oh, look at these charts. I'm the second image on Google. Got to be a gender pay gap, right?
Yeah.
No context.
It's oh, well, you want to talk about bias? There you go. There's bias data. You know how to.
That, like, every single one is like that. There was just complete generic. Here, look, this is it. Just random. No sites, no nothing.
Yeah, so the Tam fam made a comment here. Hopefully, your daughter's answer doesn't create a biased reaction towards her from students and teachers because of her opinion, which is totally true. I mean, now, if the daughter brings up a certain point and has a different view, you know,
It's tough.
how does the teacher react? How do the other students react?
That's
These
expecting a lot out of the kids nowadays. I think inherently that they're going to go along with stuff. It just is, you know?
and and the part that makes me kind of question a lot of things too is, well, who's, like I said, who is allowing some of this info, or the you know the type of stuff that the kids are learning, who's signing off on it, right? And on top of that, are the parents being notified, like, hey, this is the topic, this is, here's the outline of what their curriculum is, you know and like I said, it's kind of, we're on a very slippery slope for sure. And I'm not a teacher, I'm not in that environment, I only hear things secondhand from other parents, and from my nieces and nephews, in regards to what they're learning in school and what the environment is, because just based on what they're telling me, it's far different than when you and I went to high school or grade school. Far different.
Unbelievably.
you know
I
I,
watched a, I watched a movie from the early 2000s the other day,
yeah.
just from like the way things are. And this was, this movie's probably from 2006, 2007 or so. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's a movie called Sex Drive. It's just a comedy. Um, it's quite hilarious. Watching it and just the stuff that they say and everything, some of the words that they use in there, they definitely use some, like, what would be now like a homosexual slur. They use like the hard F word. Um, like the change is like unbelievable. Like I was watching and I was honestly, like, it's no big secret how we feel and what we talk about. I was actually
Mhm.
watching the movie and I was like, I don't know if I'm supposed to be watching this. I might get in trouble. Like I had my window open, and where I am, like people, I'm like, I shut my window so nobody can hear the movie outside accidentally.
But that's the thing. You shouldn't have to feel that way.
I
Where
did. I was like, oh man, this is gonna be.
so and any parents out there that are joining us in this video broadcast, if you guys have any other feedback, or how you guys responded, if you're parents, how have you guys responded to this? Do you guys agree or disagree with some of the stuff that Cruz and I have been talking about?
I think
Um,
it goes both ways. So like even if you didn't agree with what the topic was or what the standard was, right, that was being discussed when they were having that discussion in school, shouldn't you stand up for the fact that it should be treated very lightly because there's a chance in the future that one of those topics you're going to be on the other side of, that you're not going to agree with what they're saying in the future?
well, again, it's like, how are the teachers facilitating this? If they're saying, you know, what do they think about the gender wage gap, then that's one way. But then again, it's like, are they asking? See, the part that gets me is the intention, right? Are the teachers looking for the students to agree, or are the teachers looking for the students to think critically? Those are two different things. Because if the teachers are looking for the kids to agree, then that's indoctrination. If the kids are being taught to, like, no, you know what, I don't agree with this, you know, this is their opinion, this is their opinion that they're going to bring out, then it's like, oh, then they've done, their job as a teacher, right?
So
So
I'm sticking on this. Sorry, I'm sticking on this pay gap one because this one got me worked up a little bit. So payscale.com, gender pay gap, just some overall things. As of 2020, this is their overall uncontrolled. So this is just the quick statistics off of them. I didn't fully vet them. It's one of the top search returns from Google. I'm going to assume they're somewhat reasonable. I'll be honest. You can try and vet them yourself. I'll look for more later. Payscale.com. Uncontrolled gender pay gap. This measures the median salary for all men and all women. So this is regardless of anything. 81 cents on the dollar for women as opposed to men. The controlled, which this measures the median for men and women with the same job and qualifications, is 98 cents on the dollar.
mm,
We're getting pretty close. And that was as of 2020 statistics, they're saying.
yeah, but you were saying, though, it just incorporates every job or every situation.
That was
It's
the
not.
81 cents. The 81 cents was just male versus female, no regards.
Yeah.
The controlled, meaning we're going to measure silo versus silo with similar qualifications, they're coming in at 98 cents on the dollar.
And again, maybe one of the key variables there is the whole maternity leave. I'm looking at that and I'm like, that's
They're
that
saying this is based on similar experience. So it would be the same amount of years and everything. But it also, I mean, it could be somebody that got to 10 years of experience and they're already, whatever, say 40 or a bit older. And you can tell this not because you can legally ask their age, but you can legally ask the year that they graduated, which then inherently basically tells you their age anyways. So
yeah.
obviously they took a gap. Yeah, don't ask them their age, but ask them the year. Yeah, okay, whatever. Just ask them their age. Just ask them their age and make it a rule. You can't use it. It's the same thing. You can just beat around the bush and ask what they graduated. Dumb. But yeah, stupid rules. But and then it could be somebody where the male, you're like, okay, well, they have 10 years, but they've been just consistently working with no gaps or anything. So maybe that leads into it a little bit. But if it's the exact same rules and everything, it's saying I'll take this as what it is 98 cents on the dollar. So we'll say yes, there is a 2% pay gap currently. Sure.
And so there's obviously, like I said, there's a lot of factors, right? Like where are they getting it? Is it a weighted average? You know what I mean? How they grab the data. But that's not too far. There's obviously a 2% gap, which um, mathematically is still actually quite a bit in my mind. But it's
The biggest gap you'll see about the 2% gap there is when you look at the total earnings over the lifetime of a person.
Yep.
That's when you look and you're like, you know what, that did add up.
So we're coming in close to the hour. If anyone out there has any comments, experience that you guys want to share with everyone else about the whole gender pay gap, or is there one? Is the what do you guys think about the school system? And the main theme of our topic this week is critical theory and how it's applying to all these different scenarios that we're talking about. So if you guys
So if
have
it
initial
applies to
comments.
that, and Penny Pincher had recognized this injustice with her critical theory discussing the gender pay gap, she recognized this injustice. Because I happen to be a male, I wouldn't be able to weigh in because my particular view is not coming from the view of the oppressed.
Wait,
This is
wait,
based on critical theory, so I actually shouldn't have a view on this. I'm not allowed to
That's
say anything or talk about it.
yeah. That's the weird part, right? Wait a minute, but you're Puerto
I'm
Rican too.
sorry.
You're Puerto Rican
I'm
too.
sorry.
So at least half of you, right, has a
I
say in this.
think when we get, that whole fancy chart about intersectionality, which is basically some like BS chart to figure out how oppressed you are, I'm like slightly below a white male. Yeah. And then like we actually spent federal government dollars on teaching this in government institutions until Trump got rid of it. Thank God. Stupid.
All right. So
That's my closing thoughts.
all right.
Check out intersectionality. Find out how oppressed you are.
Find out how much I'm crying just thinking about it. All right. So with that in mind, we're a minute over the hour. Want to thank you guys for joining us in this really great discussion. I had a lot of fun talking about it, but there's obviously, these are loaded things that we're talking about, and it's very important that we, I think we're here to find some answers, to the
Yeah.
stuff that we're experiencing. I think that's one of the main reasons why we're talking about it, and we'll be coming up with some more good topics. So
No, that was a great question about the gender one and two. And don't get me
fantastic.
wrong, there is up until even recently, like in our lifetime, like there was absolutely inequalities in the workplace for women and the way that they were treated, the way that things were. Um, even my mother has examples like recently, early 90s, when like literally company rules about dress codes changed that were awkwardly chauvinistic. Like you wouldn't wear pants if you were a woman in the office. Like what? So like that was real. That happened. Like, and it didn't happen that long ago. That's insane. But at the
So
same time, that's not today, and that's not us.
yeah. So that mind, guys. Thank you guys for joining us. Really great questions and answers, and great answer by your child as well. Answering that question. Um, a very touchy, definitely a very touchy subject to talk about in school. So good luck with the school, school scenario. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but my general impression is that there is quite a bit of concern. So due diligence is key here, especially for kids' education to make sure that they get the best that they can. So that might be a good segue into next week's topic. But until then, join us next week at 6 p.m. Cruz, actually, before we close, Cruz,
Oh yeah, I'll be
Cruz.
joining you at about like 2 in the morning. No, maybe 1 in the morning.
Yeah. So he's gonna be in a completely different country. So
Yeah,
we're gonna be trying to
I'll be in
figure.
Croatia. It'll be the Croatian special for a couple weeks.
Yeah. So make sure. I think for next week, especially since you're gonna be there, if you have like a nice view of the place that you're gonna be at, it might make sense to do a quick tour before starting everything. So
Yeah,
make sure that you guys tune in and
yeah.
check it out. And we'll continue on talking about these topics that are important for us to improve as a society. So thank you very much, and talk to you guys next week.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.